What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Pro v Pro, 1 week away from the Open Championship. And yet we've got a ton to talk about this week. Keegan Bradley as the Ryder Cup captain, kind of taking the golf world by storm. Nobody saw this one coming. What is your initial reaction to it, Justin?
So I think it's a great move, but I think it's a great move for all the wrong reasons. If he doesn't get thrown under the bus last year, this never happens, right? I mean, the bottom line is if he doesn't go through all that stuff from last year, they don't even consider this.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think it's a great idea. Like, I like his energy. I think he'll be a great captain. I don't have a problem with him being the captain, but that being said, it's still all politics that got him into being the captain at this age.
To take a slightly less cynical view, I do think there's an argument to be made that it's true this doesn't happen if last year doesn't happen. But I think there also can be an element of, man, it was cool to see just how much Keegan cared. And that's got to be a big part of the captaincy, right? Just knowing that this guy is going to do everything it takes, not just that week, but he's going to prep the right way. He's going to evaluate guys the right way throughout the season. He's going to have a game plan for the golf course. Like, I think that's one thing that the U.S. team has consistently been beaten at by the European team, is just having a game plan for golf courses. Of course, on home soil, it has mattered less because the U.S. courses have really kind of leaned into the style of play of the American golfers, the length advantage that the Americans have typically had over the last few years. So it's mattered less. But then you go to the European courses, and the U.S. have just been killed because they haven't had a game plan for those courses the way the Europeans have. That's something that Keegan does pretty well. So I like the pick. I agree. Definitely politics involved, but I also think that there was some just sound analysis that I think Keegan can do a really good job.
Yeah, I just think that was all brought to light by what happened last year, right? Like I said, I don't have a problem. I love the idea of him being a captain. I think he will be a really good captain. I just don't think any of this is brought to light without everything that happened last year and the way that all of that went down. That's just, I just think that's the fact of the matter. Like, I'm not saying that, like I said, I'm not saying that it's a bad pick. I like it. I think he'll do a lot of things that other people do. I think he gets away from the buddy ball, right? We're not going to have, I'm going to go put my two best friends together and let them, have fun. We're here to win, to win. And winning is fun, right? That's the bottom line. So I like the idea of Keegan Bradley. I think it'll work out. I hope they don't. I see all these rumors about like Michael Jordan being the, assistant and all. I don't know that I want to go that far down the line. I thought Jim Furyk would have been a great pick this year because I think that he kind of does a lot of the things that you are talking about, but he does it. He's intense in a different way. He's like in a quiet intense. So that's who I would have picked this year. Because I don't think that Keegan making the team is out of the question either. So I don't know. That's just an opinion. I like the idea. I don't know. I love the idea. I don't know if it was the right time and if any of it happens without last year, but I think he'll do great.
Would you be as opposed to something as off the board as like bringing Michael Jordan in or something along those lines on the road where the Americans have struggled so much, and maybe it makes a little more sense to change things up a bit?
Yeah, and I'm okay with him being part of it, right? He's obviously got a lot of skins on the wall, but he doesn't need to be this outspoken on the golf course. I am the assistant captain in the way, because he's not. He may think he's golf knowledgeable, but he's not at all. And so I like I said, if he wants to go in and talk to the guys and be some kind of emotional support system there, especially when things are hard and all that, I'm completely okay with that. I just don't want it to be a rolled out, here I am, Michael Jordan, I'm the assistant captain, you're going to listen to me, this is how you play golf type of deal.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. Last thing on this. Do you think it's an issue of any kind that Obviously, Keegan is going to be trying to qualify as a player as well. Do you see any complications there where, like, I've seen some people say, oh, he's not going to be spending enough time thinking about his duties as a coach because he's going to be trying to qualify. I think there's plenty of time for both. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think that at that point I think you're overestimating the coaching as early as necessary, right? Like, so a lot of the prep work is going to be how the golf course is set up, how it's playing, and that's all going to come in the final couple weeks, right? And I think we'll have a clear-cut view of where Keegan stands as far as being on the team. The problem is, what if we get to the same exact situation as last year where Keegan is right on the bubble and now he is the coach? Like, obviously he thinks he could have helped the team more than what, their poor showing last year. So what kind of scrutiny then does it come down to of like, hey, I want to play, but I don't know if it's the right thing to do. Then he does choose himself and he goes out there and gets waxed. There's so many negatives to that side of it.
Yeah, I don't know what he will do, but I can tell you what I would do personally if I were in his shoes here is say, I will be on the team if I qualify through points alone. I won't choose myself. I would just get that out of the way as early as possible and then go from there. But I think the other interesting thing is, let's say he does qualify. Maybe he's like the last guy in on merit alone. How do you decide how often to put yourself out there on the golf course versus just, sending other guys out there? You kind of, maybe you give yourself one of the better ball and alternate shot rounds, or one or two, and then just go handle your singles match. Like, that's going to be an interesting aspect of it too. So the one thing I did read, I can't remember who said it, but someone was like, I think this would have been the perfect kind of shakeup for the year that the Americans go on the road to Europe. I don't know if it's the best for Bethpage Black, but personally, I just think he's such a damn good competitor. I'm excited to see what he can do.
I definitely agree. I think that it's just going to be a hard road, right? But this is the deal. The people inside the ropes know more than anybody outside the ropes. They know how the locker room is. People think that nobody knows what's going on amongst other players. That is completely false. Everybody knows. And I would even go to the extent of, are they playing good, or are they just happen to be scoring good, or maybe are they playing better than what their score is showing? And Keegan knows that. He'll recognize that inside the ropes and being involved. I like I said, I think if I could do it all, if I could do it for him, it would have been Furyk with Keegan as the assistant captain, and just roll and say, here, these are the two that are in charge, or even co-captaincy, right? Like, you two are going to run this. We're going to have, and I think that's kind of the wave of the future for us, is having one older tour player that was really successful, like a Furyk, being with another. Keegan's not young, obviously, for tour. You don't want a real young guy that's on tour, but a veteran that is still playing and still inside the ropes. I think that would be a huge win for the Americans to go that route.
Yeah, I like that structure, and then it would also kind of perfectly set up who the next captain is going to be, right? So this one is Furyk with Keegan as the assistant. Next time it's Keegan with somebody else as his assistant, and then that guy is first in line, as long as they do a good job to be the next captain. But let's move on. Obviously, that's it was big news in the golf world and exciting news. So wanted to talk that through. For the rest of the show, we've got John Deere recap, which includes some. Sometimes the recaps aren't all that interesting. Some very interesting discussions to be had from the John Deere. Then we'll get into the Scottish Open, talk the course fit model, talk our outrights, one and done, and from there, we will build an underdog 3-pick play. Once again, the official pick of the show. Nearly hit another one this past week, so we're going to try to keep that ball rolling. John Deere Classic. Davis Thompson gets the win. Our one and done selection, by the way, which the elevated events have really kind of screwed up, in my mind, the entire one and done process, because it's become all about the elevated events and not about these really fun, like, secondary events where we get a win and we move from like 2000th to 1500. So not a whole lot of movement. We're going to need to do more than just that Davis Thompson win. But what stood out to you the most from this past week? Was it the fact that we had another 59? Was it the fact we had another runaway winner? Or was it the fact we had two youngsters, Michael Thorbjornsen and Luke Clanton, finish 1 and 2 tee to green?
I think what stood out the most from watching, I watched most of Saturday, and I don't want to say most, in and out, Saturday and Sunday both, and I watched a lot. Davis Thompson's demeanor is what stood out the most. Not the fact that he was winning the tournament or losing the tournament or how he was playing. He was unbelievably stoic.
Mhm.
I mean, no emotion, never looked like he was excited. You never got this, hey, you couldn't even tell he was winning a PGA Tour event in my mind. Like, he good shot, bad shot, like it was just the way he handled himself. I think that's what stood out the most.
Did you see the clips online of his like high school basketball highlights?
Dude, pretty good.
Yeah. I completely agree about how stoic he looked. I saw the clip of his basketball highlights after, or maybe it was like on the 15th hole or something. And my first thought was, oh, I get it now, because it's just the perfect example of a guy having experience in a number of different sports and how that helps him mentally, where it just looked to me like, he was trying to close out a fourth quarter. And when you're in the midst of a fourth quarter like that, you're not celebrating every bucket or anything like that. It's just all business until the final whistle. And it seemed like he took that exact mentality on the golf course. So I agree. I loved everything that I saw from him.
Yeah, and I think he also showed. It's so funny because you've heard so many people talk, oh, he's just not living up to the hype. He's not as good as everybody thought he was and all that. And I think it comes back to the discussion that you and I have so much of. It's just because they don't do it at the time that you think they're supposed to doesn't mean they're not capable. And I think this is another case of like his talent showed that he is capable. And when he does have his A game, like I think you can see him, especially in an event like this. I think his A game, he can compete with the best, and then he can run away with events like this.
Yeah, it was also interesting because there were guys making a serious run at him on Sunday. So the fact that he made a couple long ones early, I think really helped him, because without those two like 40 footers, whatever he made, Thorbjornsen, a couple others would have gotten really, really close to him, to the point where he might have started to feel a little bit nervousness that he didn't have to feel, because I think it never got less than 3 or something like that. And it never got to a number that number one felt close and number two felt close because Thompson made a mistake, right? It was all the only times that it got quote unquote close were when someone else was making birdies. But Thompson was probably thinking, you know what, I've got more holes and I'm just making birdies and pars, so they can't catch me. So great to see from him. How impressed were you with those youngsters, though, and what they did tee to green, particularly just with their ball striking?
Yeah, so I mean, I brought Clanton up last week about his price and is he this good? And obviously he is. We've seen it numerous weeks in a row now, and I would say he putted average at very best in the golf tournament as a whole. He is. They just hit it so far, and it's just so impressive the control they have of their golf ball. And I would have probably still not won the single entry, but I definitely had Clanton and Springer and traded and last second swapped maybe M and Merritt or somebody like that, like two other players. I had McNeely in my lineup, and I was never getting off of McNeely. With him missing a cut, it probably wouldn't have mattered, but it was frustrating when I saw those guys, because I had Bjornson in my lineup. So Clanton and then him and then Springer. I was like, man, I could be making a run. But then I looked and I was like, yeah, I was never getting off McNeely. So
Speaking of those like last minute pivots, this past Wednesday, one of our subscribers asked me, hey, does your hot take from the week prior about Thorbjornsen still stand? And I thought, yeah, it really does. And then Josh brought him up as one of his best plays. So all of a sudden on Wednesday, Thorbjornsen became, quote, like the FTN play of the week. So it was pretty fantastic to see him play as well as he did. So reminder to everybody, there's value in just being a subscriber, being in the Discord chat on Wednesdays leading up 2 events. So hopefully we get more of the same this week. But one last thing. Now had 259s in the past 2 weeks. I've seen a lot of conversation in regards to that of like, oh, the game's getting too easy for these guys. Can we take a moment to just realize that in Springer's 59, it might have been like I don't want to say the worst 59 I've ever seen, but the luckiest or the flukiest, because 3 holeouts and a couple of them looked like they were going to go flying past the hole if they didn't go in. So yeah, it was a 59. It was a fantastic round, regardless of whether it was a 59 or a 62. But I don't think it was a sign of, golf has become too easy.
No, I mean, dude. Yeah, even the first chip in on the par 3, and then, there's just no. I mean, he shot 59. It was great, but it's not. Well, I mean, it's and that golf course obviously played easy. I think once again, though, we come to the conclusion if they were to put Bermuda in and firm up their greens, I think you would see a lot different scores. Period.
100%, and it's such a great point too. Like, just because we have back-to-back weeks of some of the easiest golf courses on tour doesn't mean that we should make decisions for Bay Hill or TPC Sawgrass based on what these guys are doing to Detroit Golf Club and TPC Deere Run. It just doesn't make a ton of sense. This is just a part of the schedule where you're going to see some really, really low scores, but now hopefully it'll get a little bit tougher as we move to the Scottish Open. I don't love the course fit model this week, and it's a tough week to prep for in a number of ways, I think, but one of the ways in which it really stands out to me as being difficult this week is that there's almost no wind in the forecast. All 4 days, projected winds topping out at like 15 miles per hour, mostly sustained around 5 to 10. It's going to be cool in the 50s all 4 days, but that messes with things because the course fit model is built on past rounds, past events where the wind was up. Now, so we get changing conditions, and the course fit model itself not very strong. We have a big emphasis on driving distance up 75%. So driving distance 75% more predictive at the Scottish Open than the typical event, but then driving accuracy 60% less than usual. Approach 60% less than usual. Around the green 40% less than usual. Putting 70% less than usual. So it really is like we've got distance as being predictive, nothing else being predictive almost at all. Josh did find some approach play signal. He did find some around the green signal, particularly out of bunkers. What's your thought of what should translate to success here, and how we should take what the course fit model is telling us and apply it, but also like how much of a grain of salt should we take with that?
Yeah, I do know that I figured that the course fit was going to be super high on distance just of knowing this golf course from years prior about hitting it really far. I mean, Rory's 2-iron here last year is one of the best shots that you'll see ever, I think, maybe because it was blowing 100. I don't know. It's just this is one of those weeks that I think you just kind of – how many people are there to get ready for next week and how many there to win? And so I think that's the biggest deal to me of like what guys are there to go actually worry about this week and try to win this week, and then what guys are going over there just to get their bearings on straight for next week and get used to the time and the weather and stuff like that.
I think that used to be a really good talking point for weeks like this, but I think more and more we've seen a change in the way players prep for majors. And I think there's now an almost universal understanding that the best way to prep for the pressure of a major is to get yourself in contention. So I think everyone is here to get themselves in contention and try to win this thing.
Yeah. I guess my point is like if this was a major, you wouldn't see, I mean, I guess you used to see it a little bit, but you don't see very many people, not leaving till Monday, right? Like even guys that are taking the Scottish seriously, like I know some of the guys around here, Siwoo and those guys, they left on Friday of last week to get over there. So, I mean, guys like that are going over there to he's trying to prepare for the British, but he's also trying to get there early enough to get his body right for this week.
Very good point. You mentioned the Rory shot on 18. So for those who can't remember, he had, I think it was 202 to the flag. He's hitting 4-iron, something he carries around 250 most of the time, into just a crazy strong wind, and hits this gorgeous stinger cut type shot to, I don't know, 8 feet. One of the best shots we saw all season. But I think it also speaks to why in the past we haven't seen a ton of approach signal, because what it takes to be a great iron player in crazy wind like that is so different than what it takes to be a great iron player week in, week out on the PGA Tour. So I think that that's why we see less approach signal than usual in the course fit model. The way that I'm going to approach it this week, since we don't have much wind in the forecast, if we did have a lot of wind, I'd say, okay, I don't care about approach signal or approach play. I'll go look at Josh's windy splits. Since we don't have wind, I want guys who project well in the course fit model, project well in our simulations, but who would also stand to benefit if approach play becomes more predictive this week than we have typically seen at this golf course.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I think you're going to have a lot more chances than normal, right? Just because it's not going to be windy. You're going to hit it. I would guess going to hit it in the fairway more. And the reason length was such a big deal is because if you hit it in the high grass, you could still hit it on the green. Now, all of a sudden, you might see a little bit more of, you're from the fairway hitting good, for lack of a better way of putting it, more American-like golf.
Yeah, I also think that the distance can be really predictive here too, in large part because you can take certain bunkers out of play off the tee, right? If you're able to carry it, instead of saying, all right, I either have to stay short of this bunker or I have to fit it between the bunker and the high grass on the left side, if you can just say, that bunker's not in play for me, I'm going over it, that's a huge advantage. Not just because you end up with a shorter yardage in, it's just it makes the tee shot easier. It widens your landing area just because of your distance. Something, by the way, that we saw a decent amount of on my preview show with Pat Mayo for the Open Championship. If you haven't seen that yet, head over to Pat Mayo's YouTube channel, Mayo Media Network, and check out the British Open Championship preview that we did. I just played the course on a simulator. We did it for 9 holes. Video was a little bit choppy, but people seem to really, really enjoy it. So we will be doing more of that in the future. But the same concept that we talked about a lot on that show is what we're talking about here. It's that being long off the tee helps in so many ways, and that's why we see this huge, huge boost in driving distance signal here at the Scottish Open too.
Yeah, and I think a little bit comes down to how firm and fast it's going to play. I think I heard that there is maybe a little bit of rain and might soften it up. So I think that just, once again, you go to carry distance off the tee and then a little bit more approach than maybe normally that you see over there. So it definitely changes it. I don't know why, but it just seems disappointing when we get these big golf tournaments over there and we get 0 wind. We're always just like, man, we just want carnage and see all these special shots. And
I wonder how fast the greens will be, because in years past, like one of the reasons why typically whenever we go to Europe, the greens aren't as fast is because they know winds are coming, and so they just can't make them that fast. With winds projected to be down this week, will we see faster than usual greens at the Scottish, or do you think they'll still be stuck at, let's say, 10 or 11 on the stem?
Yeah, and do they even have the ability to get them that much faster? You know what I mean? Like, that's the real thing, the real question. I don't know enough about being over there. Do they have the ability to all of a sudden speed them up to a 13?
I don't know either, but I think that you and I both agree that the slower they are, the more advantageous it is for some of the worst putters in the field, just because, not even necessarily because slow greens are easier to putt on and that will help them, but more so just because it becomes a different test. And so if we know that they typically fail the test of fast greens on the PGA Tour, having a different test might help them. So is that something that you're going to look for again this week? Again, we have a 70% less than usual predictive value on putting. Do you think we'll see the same thing this week?
Yeah, I'm probably just going to lean into length, and then also just, kind of ability to win. You kind of get a mix of fields here, right? You get some DP World Tour guys and then some PGA Tour guys that kind of collide in this event, both kind of doing the same thing. Because I'm sure there's some DP World Tour guys that aren't even in next week that are playing this week.
So, length off the tee, guys who stand to benefit from putting being less predictive than usual. There are two who immediately come to mind for me. Do you know who those two guys are?
Length off the tee and putting less predictive. There's a bunch that come to mind. Who would you be thinking of immediately? Would be
I'll give an additional hint. Both would stand to benefit if iron play meant a little bit more this week than it usually does at this golf course.
I mean, the problem is the tiers, right? Like, there's a lot of guys that are going to benefit from it. So what tier? I mean, Morikawa is going to benefit from it for sure if iron play pops. Like, he would be the first one that I would think would benefit the most, or that would be the most different from the model that if iron play decides to pop.
Yeah, I agree there. Although he wouldn't, he still wouldn't have that distance advantage. But the two guys I'm looking at, one is 90-1, one is 60-1.
So Ben On benefits a bunch if putting isn't predictive. So I would guess that would be one of them.
He's the guy at 60.
And then at 90-1, man, this is tough with a big field. Length, iron play, putting less predictive. I don't know.
Keith Mitchell, going right back to him.
I was
our boy Keith.
He played so bad last week.
Really strong week this past week at the John Deere. He still isn't making putts. He still lost 0.33 strokes per round, but gained 1.8 with his irons, gained 0.7 off the tee. He's just been so damn consistent off the tee, and the only thing holding him back right now is making putts. Even his short game is starting to come back into form. He's now at just negative 0.02 for our strokes gained around the green metric. One of the best ball strikers in the world, gaining 0.39 per round with distance, 0.35 per round with accuracy off the tee, 0.63 per round with his irons. For context, that's Corey Connors level. That's Victor Hovland, Ludwig Oberg level of iron play to go with off the tee. That's, at the same level of Minwoo Lee. Again, Oberg. In fact, he's been slightly better than Oberg off the tee. The only guy in this field who's clearly been better off the tee than Mitchell is Rory. And then you also give him iron play that's been better than Rory's. It's been at the level of Oberg and Hovland and Aaron Rai. It's just been awesome with his ball striking. The problem is he's losing 0.22 strokes per round with his putter, worst in the field of anybody over $6,600. So it's been the thing that holds him back, but it's less predictive than usual this week. It was less predictive than usual last week. He didn't lose quite as much, and he gets a pretty high finish. Where did he actually finish? T18. If we got a top 25 for a guy who scores well enough that when he finishes top 25, he's usually like 15th in DraftKings points. Sign me up for that. And if you do get that spike week with the putter, now all of a sudden he's in contention. We have him at 2.4% to win at 90-1. That's enormous value. So clearly my favorite bet of the week, although I also really like Benny On at 60-1 as well. Those are the two that I have placed so far.
I just hate, so every time they showed Mitchell last week, his mannerisms were so bad. He just didn't seem like, it's hard for me to get behind a guy that just acts like that. Like, I don't know, like, as good as everything is, like he just the way he is carrying himself right now is not the same as what it has been in the past.
So I agree with that 100%. The thing that I'm counting on is when he gets himself into contention again, it will be in part because he's actually making putts. And I think the entirety of what we've seen from the way he's carrying himself on the course right now is just frustration with the putter. And you can remember early in the season, like Scotty Scheffler dealt with the same thing. Scotty clearly did a better job, But we also saw that level of frustration from Scotty. We saw him dropping the putter. We saw him, yelling at himself, or even yelling at Ted Scott about a read, this and that. And so as soon as he started making putts, that frustration level completely went away. I think Mitchell's still going to have it to some degree. And it seems with Mitchell, we've talked about it before, that it almost seems like he is expecting himself to miss those putts and to make the mistake that knocks him out of contention. And so in some way, he's been a self-fulfilling prophecy. But again, 90-1, and we have him at 2.4%. So even if you say, the simulation can't factor in the way he's carried himself, even if you knock that down to 1.2%, he's still a really, really good bet at 90-1. So if you have his win odds just because of the way that he's carried himself and the demeanor and what you think he's going to do once under the gun and he needs to make that pressure putt, you can still do that and find plenty of value in this outright.
Yeah, I think I'll probably look elsewhere. I'm gonna look for a guy a little bit more off the beaten path, so to say. Like somebody like Nikolai Hogard comes to mind immediately.
Mm-hmm.
A guy that's very familiar over there, that hits it really far off the tee. Maybe is known to just pop out all of a sudden. He was the first guy that stood out to me at, I think, 6,800 or something, of just being too low.
What do you think of Van Rooyen? He's another guy who kind of stands out. He's available 80-1, and we have him, I think it was 1.5% to win.
He's been pretty high on all the models lately.
Yeah. I mean, he's played really well, and he's actually putted quite well. The one concern that I have is we saw him miss a few easy ones once he got in contention, which is kind of what we expect from him. And to that point, I think one of the reasons why his strokes gained putting has been so damn good of late is he's making a lot of putts from like the Spieth range, right? It's not that he's been deadly consistent from 8 feet. It's that he's making a kind of crazy amount of his 20 to 30 footers that we just can't expect to continue. But all that being said, I do think I like him at 1.5% to win at just 80-1.
Yeah, he's another guy that I just don't like. I think we could see him on the leaderboard. I'm not sure that he has the ability to win in this field, and so I don't have much of a thought on him. I'm not totally against him. I don't have a clear-cut opinion.
That brings up a really good point to keep in mind. When we have a course fit model like this, where 4 of the 5 categories are less predictive than usual, it creates a lot less separation in the expected strokes gain statistic. So, for example, Keith Mitchell's at 1.07, Benny On is at 0.82, Eric Van Rooyen is at 0.74. Typically, we see the top guys like Scheffler has been, 2.7, something like that. Rory's been low 2s, mid 2s. Rory's at the top at 1.77. Xander second at 1.71. Xander's another guy who's consistently been between 2.5. So we get less separation, which is why this mid tier of guys are rating out so well for us in the simulations. It's another reason why, if you think that approach play is going to matter more than usual this week, you really have to keep that in mind, because now that, the fact that Rory's gaining 0.45 per round with his iron, Xander 0.71, Oberg 0.64, that is going to matter a lot more. And it means that when you go to this mid-tier, you've got to find the guys who can compete with that iron play. Benny On 0.34, Mitchell 0.63, Tom Hoge 0.8. Van Rooyen is at 0.19. So a little bit less for Van Rooyen than those other guys. So I'm a little bit more hesitant to bet Van Rooyen this week than I am those other two. But I do think it's a week where we can kind of take a number of shots in this mid-tier range. Remember last year, the guy that Rory beat out, Robert McIntyre. We've got a lot of guys in this mid-tier range in significantly better form than McIntyre was in a year ago.
Yeah, I'm interested your thoughts with the drop in putting and a guy that's been pretty unpredictable on the greens. What's your thoughts on Wyndham Clark? He's only 8,100 on DraftKings, which seems like it's too cheap. The only problem is that may make him super chalky. He's one of those guys that we know he can hit it far enough. He kind of, it seems like he has weeks like Pebble where he just makes everything, and then other weeks where he just can't make anything at all. seems like a lot of value there. I think I saw him at like 40-1, 35 to 40-1. Seems like some value for a guy that we know can win, especially in fields like this.
Yeah, I like the call. Available 45-1. We have him at 2.4% to win. So showing some value there. I think it's a really solid fit just on his length alone. I think I like him more as a DraftKings play as long as he's not super popular, because one of the things that we know about Wyndham is just a crazy, crazy good scorer. So many eagles, so many birdies. He can get hot like nobody else. So I really, really like his scoring ability on DraftKings. Another guy similar to what we just talked about with Keith. Like if he finishes 10th, it's a good chance he's top 5 in DraftKings scoring. If he finishes 30th, there's a good chance he's top 15 in DraftKings scoring. So always like Wyndham in that regard, and I agree. 8,100, way too cheap. Hopefully he won't be too popular because of that. Let's see. What are your thoughts on Davis Thompson this week? Do you think there will be a win hangover? Do you think that people are going to be off of him because of that? Or is this one of those cases where, hey, yeah, it was a great win, but he's ramping himself up for the Open Championship, so you know he's going to still be in it mentally this week. What are your thoughts on Thompson?
Well, I think it more comes down to just his overall, his mental capacity, just how he acts, right? So I like if it's anything like the Black V motion he showed on the golf course, I would expect him to just continue to build on it. So I wouldn't be surprised if I don't know that I think he'll come out and win or anything like that, but if he's right back in contention, I wouldn't be surprised, especially if it's going to play more like American golf.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see what his ownership is like on DraftKings. If he's low owned, that's definitely a place that I will be happy to go back to. His 0.98 expected strokes gained are the second best behind Keith Mitchell in the 7,000s. And you have to go all the way up to Min Woo Lee at 9,200 to find somebody else projected for more expected strokes gained than Davis Thompson. So I like that quite a bit. One last guy I want to talk about. I mentioned his name briefly, but Tom Hoge, we have at 1.3% to win, and that is 1.3% if iron play is as unpredictive as it's been here in the past. If you get a boost in predictive value in iron play, Tom Hoge's 1.3% would jump to probably around 2%. He has the highest expected strokes gained approach this week at 0.8. Shoffley second at 0.71. He's that damn good with his irons. So another guy available 90-1. Dude, I might have like 5 or 6 guys outrights between 50 and 100-1 this week if we keep this pace up.
Do we know that he can cover all those bunkers though, like the cross bunkers and stuff? Like that would be a key for him. Like a lot of those cross bunkers have to be covered for it to even matter for iron play.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think he'd be able to get all of them, but he has been significantly more accurate off the tee of late. His driving accuracy is up to 0.28 strokes gained per round is our estimate. So I think his iron play is so good that a lot of the time, like he's one of the very few players that if you say, Mitchell and Benny On are carrying a bunker and they're going to have 80 yards in, and Tom Hoge decides, you know what, I got to stay short of that 160 out. Hoge can still compete from a proximity perspective in that regard. Not every time, but he can do it enough. And to your point, like I don't know exactly how many of those bunkers he'll be able to take on versus having to stay short of, but definitely somebody that I think has the capability. And it's not like we haven't seen guys without crazy length compete and contend here. Tom Kim has done it. So I really like Hoge at that 90-1 number. Again, I think this entire mid-tier is underrated because the market doesn't see how much of this golf course just brings that like mid-tier towards the top level of talent at the golf course.
Yeah, I think that there's some guys in there too that I really want to play that I'm sure don't project as well. Matt Fitzpatrick being one of them. There's guys in that like high 8s, low 9s that I think are just going to go overlooked in this field too, because I think there's so many of the mid-tier 7s that you could pair, 4 mid-tier 7s with your, Shoffleys and Obergs and likes. So that's just an opinion. I don't know if that's the way it's going to end up building, but
Real quick, let's talk one and done before we get into some value plays for DraftKings, and then we'll close by building out a 3-pick play. So, have you given much thought to the one and done yet?
Not a ton, just a little. It kind of comes down to which one of those guys that we haven't used up there towards the mid to top tier. Tom Kim was one that came to mind because he has been kind of playing better, and like you said, he's contended here, even despite not being the longest. Outside of that,
the only thing I was going to say is I would like us to go to somebody who's either dominant with their irons and would be able to take advantage if that changes, but more so a mid-tier guy with length off the tee. I think that's the recipe this week. We know we get them at really low ownership because this is a stronger field, and I think we want to lean into what the course fit model is telling us, and just in terms of the top tier not having its usual separation from the mid tier of talent.
And we've used Wyndham already, correct?
Yeah, we've used Wyndham. I think we've used Benny on, and I think we've used Mitchell. So let me double check all of those. But Wyndham we used at the Genesis. Benny on we used at the Byron Nelson, and Keith Mitchell we used at Mexico Open. So,
I mean, Fitzpatrick fits that bill of hitting it long off the tee.
His carry distance is a little questionable, though, isn't it? Like, so much of his distance comes from his ball flight and how much run out he gets.
I just think he has the ability to hit it really far.
Mm-hmm. We've used Min Woo, unfortunately. That would have been another good one.
I agree. He's going to be part of my DraftKings lineup for sure.
He is, by the way, the ultimate course fit if iron play remains as unpredictable as it usually is this week. So that's something to keep in mind with Minwoo. Definitely another week where we can skill set stack, by the way. Like if you're running 2 lineups, you build one where it's just distance and a lack of putting. You build another where it's distance, a lack of putting, and iron play. So in that first one, you'd be looking at Minwoo. Benny On would fit both. Keith Mitchell would fit both. But you'd have a number of lineups like that. And then you'd have lineups where you do want that iron play. And it would be Keith Mitchell, it would be Tom Hoagie instead. So lots of different ways to build this week. Should be a fun one. But yeah, I'm trying to think.
Where are you thinking here?
So the first one that comes to mind for me is actually Van Rooyen. Most of the guys that we talked about in this mid-tier with distance, as we just saw, we've already used. So Benny On we can't use Wyndham, we can't use Keith Mitchell. We used Adam Scott. Yeah, we can't use Adam Scott. He's another guy that would fit it. We used Scott at the API. So by process of elimination, Van Rooyen is the one that stands out to me. And then if we wanted to go the iron play route, I think Tom Hoagie would also be a really strong.
Do you have any thoughts on going back to McIntyre this week after he played well here last year? He's obviously in better form here this year.
Yeah, he's not super far behind those guys in expected strokes gained. 0.53 for McIntyre, Van Rooyen at 0.74. McIntyre every bit as long, 0.21 strokes per round gained with driving distance. Not a good iron player, so we'd be banking on. Let me before I finish that thought, let me see if his iron play has been better. Maybe there are signs of it coming back to life. Not really. So lost a quarter of a stroke per round at both the Travelers and the Rocket Mortgage. When he won at the Canadian Open, by the way, one of his worst ball striking weeks. He actually gained 2.8 strokes per round on the greens. Unheard of for a guy who's not a very good putter. Lost 1.8 per round at the Rocket Mortgage this past week. So if his ball striking was in better form, I'd definitely be interested. I don't like the fact that his success of late has come predominantly with the putter, something that we really can't count on from Bobby. But doesn't project poorly, and his win odds 1.2%, not very far behind the 1.5% for Van Rooyen or the 1.3% for Tom Hoagie. The thing I would say, though, is that 1.2% for Bobby Mack would go down if iron play is more predictive this week than usual at the golf course, whereas for Hoagie and Van Rooyen, it would go up.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was just thinking outside the box of who else. Obviously, we know he's contended here, and we know he hits it far enough.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to throw out some more names, Kitayama would be an interesting one. He's at 0.59 expected strokes gained, long off the tee, poor putter. Another guy solid with his iron, so he would benefit in that regard. Let me double check that he's available. We do have him available. So lots of guys, I think, that we know are going to be low owned, and they all kind of fit what we're looking for this week. So we've got plenty of options. Maybe we don't have to finalize it this week.
I would probably lean into EVR out of the pick. Yeah. I think Fitzpatrick and EVR would be my top two.
Cool. I like that too. I think Van Rooyen's probably my number one. Hoagie would be my number two. So lots.
I just think Fitzpatrick's the most likely to win, in my opinion. Like, he has, just knowing from his past, and if he got hot and played well, like at a place like this, he could win. And I think that's why I lean into a guy like that over maybe some of these other mid-tier guys.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with that. Personally, I think I would say Tom Hoagie is the most likely to win of the bunch, but Fitz is definitely up there. So we will finalize that decision tomorrow. For now, we've got a bunch in play. Anybody can use those. And with that, let's jump into the cheaper range. We do have another $5,000 range this week on DraftKings. Any values that really stand out to you?
I mean, there's definitely a few guys down there that I think are interesting, but I just think because of the ability to build so many guys in the 7,000s that you might not see many people go down to the 5,000s. There was one that stood out. Ramsey sticks out to me because I know he hits it far. And he's comfortable over there playing inside his, basically where he's from. He was the first one that I really saw that I was like, this guy's too cheap. There's a couple that you could get behind. I think Southgate played good last week. It's just weird to build because I just don't think you have to build down there. I mean, Matty Schmid hits as far as anybody on tour. So if you think it's simply driving distance, like, he's a pretty easy one to just pencil in.
It brings up a good question. As we go to Scotland here, how much do you think it is advantageous to go to players who are used to playing in Europe versus just playing guys that well, their games well because they play on the PGA Tour week in, week out? What's your balance there? Because I think a lot of people like to say, oh, we're in Europe, I should find a European tour guy. Personally, I think this week, especially when wind is expected to be down as much as it is, I just want the better golfers. And 9 times out of 10, that's going to be the PGA Tour player.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all, especially a week like this. I just think if I've got a deciding factor, between two guys that I think are about the same, I'm going to lean into the guy that's, because it definitely matters. There's still a comfort level of being in your home country. Like, it still matters. But that being said, yes, if it comes down to skill set, I'm going to take the better skill set.
The range that I find really interesting is the low 6,000s. Kevin Yu, Sam Stevens, Doug Gim, Andrew Novak, Mackenzie Hughes, Taylor Moore. It's a long list. Then you even go up to the 6,400, Eric Cole, Adam Hadwin, Ben Griffin at 65 and 66, Austin Eckroat at 6,500. I think the 6,000 range is absolutely loaded. You also get Kurt Kitayama at 67, Højgaard, who you mentioned earlier, 68. I think we can load up on these 6,200 guys. Kevin Yu, probably my favorite of the bunch, super long off the tee, excellent iron player. So he already projects well, and he would project extremely well if iron play was more predictive than usual this week. So he kind of fits everything that I'm looking for.
Especially if you talk about a bad putter, if it's not predictive at all.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep, 100%.
He definitely sticks out as a guy that could light it up, especially the more iron play matters and the less putting matters. Like that's a really good spot for him.
Roster construction is going to be interesting this week because you have the really cheap guys like Kevin Yu to make studs and duds work, and yet we've also been talking this whole time about how the advantage for the studs this week isn't quite as large as it usually is. So do you want to do what you have to do to fit in Rory and or Xander and then load up on the 6K range, or do you want to just go to the mid-tier range where guys project extremely well? Davis Thompson, Keith Mitchell, Benny On. I say it every week, but I think ownership is going to be the main thing driving that answer for me. If we see a lot of studs and duds, I'll go that route. If we see a lot of balanced lineups, I will happily go studs and duds. Rory, it's not like Rory and Xander don't project better than everybody else. It's just not as big of an advantage as it usually is for those two guys. So very, very intriguing DraftKings week because of all of these variables and all of these guys who project quite well for us. With that, let's jump over to Underdog and let's see if we can build a 3-pick play. Let me go grab the course stats so we can see some birdie numbers, some bogey numbers. For the Scottish Open, we've got 3.05 birdies or better per week and 3.61 bogeys or worse per week. So 3.05, 3.61. Let's see what Underdog has on the PGA side. And let me share my screen now. Okay. Blow that up for you guys. And here, let's go. Birdies are better. So we see the top end. We see it 4.5. Let's start there. What do you think of the 4.5 number for these really expensive guys? Is that too far above the average? Is it not far enough above the average? What do you think?
It's weird because they have the lower boosted a little bit on these guys too. I'm guessing it's a par 70, just judging by if I remember right, I'm judging by 67 and then 4.5. It would have to be par 70 because it doesn't add up unless they think they're going to make no bogeys.
It's par 70.
Okay. So 4.5 is a lot of birdies when if you only have 2 par 5s, right?
Yeah.
That's my opinion as far as that goes. I just a lot of these projections, everybody's on. If I were gonna go that direction, I haven't scrolled far enough down, but these. It seems like a lot of 4s. Top tier 4.5s, a lot of 4s. Is there any 3? Do they get to 3.5 anywhere?
McIntyre 3.5, Straka 3.5, Adam Scott 3.5. Now, all of these 3.5s are just 0.9x. It looks like, so I don't totally love that route. I think the here we got more 3.5 Rye, Zalatoris. Again, those guys 0.9x. I'll tell you the first one that stands out to me is a less than on Morikawa at 4.5. There is no multiplier there just because he doesn't have the distance. Now, the one thing that makes me hesitant there is we have talked about the fact iron play could be significantly more predictive than usual this week because the wind will be down. And the fact that the wind will be down, that's another thing to keep in mind. It might just play a lot easier than we've seen in years past when the wind is really blowing. So it could be that, in the past 3.05 birdies per round. What if this week it's 4 birdies per round or 3.5 birdies per round? Now all of a sudden some of these numbers would look really low. So it's a tough one. I don't love anything so far that I'm seeing. I think my biggest leans would be Straka more than 3.5 birdies, Adam Scott more than 3.5 birdies.
So I want you to go down to Zalatoris under 3.5 birdies. So he's lost distance off the tee. He's not hitting it near as far. You get under 3.5 boosted to 1.1.
Yeah.
I would be interested there.
Yeah, I definitely don't hate that. We also saw him injured in his last start. Don't know how much that will continue to bother him. We actually lost a Zalatoris less than Birdie's pick the last time we saw him. But man, like prior to that WD, 44th cut, 60th, 43rd, 41st cut, 42nd, really has not played well. The approach play hasn't been great. As you said, he's lost distance. Although I will say the distance is certainly coming back a little bit. So for a lot of the year, like in the spring, lost 2 yards, lost 6 yards, gained 7, gained 1, gained 0.4, lost 1, lost 6, lost 3 yards to the field. Then gained 7, 11, 8, 10, and 7 in his last 5 starts. So the speed is coming back a little bit, but maybe that's why he got hurt. So who knows what's exactly going on with Zalatoris. I definitely don't mind the less than 3.5 Zalatoris play. I would say if we're going to go that less than 3.5 Zalatoris play, we definitely want the less than 4.5 on Morikawa, because 2 things there. You get the correlated disadvantage of not much distance, and you'd also be fading the instance where iron play does really matter, and guys are able to just hit it close with their irons all day long with less wind than usual. So if we were to go that route, I think we would want both at once. I'm going to take them out for a moment, see what else we can find, but we might return to that combination. So let's jump over to bogeys now. 1.5 is a really, really low start. Again, that number was, what was it, 3.63 or something? Let me go double check. 3.51 for bogeys or worse. So I think 1.5 is really low.
I agree. I think all of them are low. I mean, just going through, like I saw Matsuyama's at 2. I thought that was really low. Harman was at 2 for a guy that maybe can't carry some of those bunkers. Like I thought that one stood out to me. Basically some of the shorter guys going over.
So I'll say this. I think that there's very clearly a disconnect here between their bogeys or worse lines and their birdies or better lines. I think the bogeys or worse lines say to me, this golf course is going to play a lot easier than it has in the past with no wind. The birdies or better lines say the golf course is going to play similar to how it's played in the past. One of those 2 things is wrong. I don't know which one is wrong. That makes me want to just do a traditional stack and accept a lower payout. I don't know what you're thinking here, but something's not correct. Something's not correct for sure.
I think. Well, I think you can go. So basically, I'm gonna get behind the assumption it's gonna play harder than they think it is. So therefore, I'm gonna play more overs and bogeys and unders and birdies. And I mean, like just simple, like kind of what we were talking about put together here of some of these guys. 7.33 payout. Now it's 4 instead of 3, but that's on lower birdies Zalatoris, lower Morikawa, higher bogeys on Harman and Tom Kim. So the shorter guys, you're going over in bogeys. You're playing under in birdies and kind of in the same deal, and you get almost 7.5 boost on something like that because you get 2 of the 1-1s. That's just kind of where I lean. I like unders and birdies and overs and bogeys.
So if we did that, we wouldn't get the boosted payout. My thought is that I would like us to go higher on both birdies and bogeys. I definitely agree strongly about higher on bogeys. The interesting question there is, what skill set do we want to attack on higher than bogeys? Is it we want guys who are short off the tee, or is it we want guys who are less accurate off the tee, or they struggle with their short game and they're not good iron players? Like what is the path that we are envisioning to bogeys? Is it that they drive it into a couple fairway bunkers and have to chip out?
I think that's the easiest path. I think the easiest path is the ability to not carry, and even if they decide to lay up short of those bunkers, now we're looking at 6, 7, 8 irons into greens instead of wedges. So you kind of get both sides. Even if they do lay up, it still makes the golf course a lot harder.
I think I've got one of them. Give me 1 second here. Not quite as bad as I thought. Justin Thomas is 42nd or 46th in bogey avoidance, 20th in birdie or better. I thought it was a larger discrepancy. I think at one point this year it was. So his 2.0 stood out to me, but it's not quite as good as I thought it was originally. Let's see what else we got down here. Oh, Hideki gives us a 1.1x. Did you see the same thing?
Yeah.
All right, let's check Hideki's number in that regard. Whoops. Ooh, I don't actually like that. He's 11th in bogey avoidance, 72nd.
Who's the next person above there with the boosted one?
Tommy. I think Tommy's the same way.
Yeah.
Very boring game. Let's see. I was thinking about this last week too, by the way. I don't want to get too obsessed with the bogey and birdie numbers. Tommy's hilarious. 9th in bogey avoidance, 143rd in birdie or better rate. Let's check. Does he have a birdie number? 4.0, 1.1 to lower on Tommy. That's an interesting one. Let's keep that in mind. I think we want the higher on both because I think that's just more likely in my mind. But I think so. If we go back to those numbers, we have 3.05 birdies, 3.53 bogeys per round. I think that part of those bogeys are just difficult holes where the wind isn't necessarily causing a lot of those bogeys. It's just difficult golf holes where I think the wind is typically the defense for birdies. So I think it's more likely that we see a similar number of bogeys, but a lot more birdies than the opposite, which is why I want to go higher on both. But there are some very intriguing less thans on the birdie route. So let's keep those in mind, but let's continue to look for some higher than bogey plays. I mean, the really obvious one, almost easy one is Spieth, but it's only 0.9x. So I don't necessarily want to go to that, but that's been almost automatic.
Yeah, I mean, he was automatic again last week of going over. It was pretty.
Yeah. I mean, did he might have even gone over 1.5 in his 59 watch round.
I know he made one.
Let's see. Whoops. Clicked the wrong thing. He made 4 bogeys in round 4. He only made 1 in round 3, made 2 in round 2, made 2 in round 1. Significantly more difficult golf course this week. All he does is make bogeys.
I mean, even Zalatoris, I know Zalatoris is only 0.9, but still 2 bogeys for a guy like that's just been hurt. Like I could just see how this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Let me double check Zalatoris. '99th in bogey avoidance, 148th in birdie or better rate. A lot of his numbers you kind of have to toss because he played so hurt early in the year. I started to mention this. I was thinking about this last week. How much do you think the discrepancy between bogey avoidance and birdie or better percentage really matters versus just thinking conceptually about the player? Like this week, what's the path to making birdies? Distance off the tee, and then maybe some approach play skill, less putting than usual since putting is less predictive than usual. What's the skill that will lead to bogeys? Inaccuracy off the tee where you're finding yourself in bunkers, the inability to scramble. I don't necessarily have the answer. I think that I almost want to lean more into skill sets than the bogey avoidance versus birdie or better percentage discrepancy, but that might be more true on the birdie side where distance is so clearly the thing that matters most this week.
Yeah, it's just going to come down to how this golf course plays. I mean, that's
Mhm.
really the one thing that is so intriguing is how we're playing someplace that has never had this little wind at any point. So
Yeah. Let's see. I've got another potential winner here.
I think if you're going to look at going higher than birdies, I think Wyndham Clark is a really, really good place to start at over
Yeah.
4.
Yep.
It's not boosted one way or the other, but I really over 4 for him stood out.
I love that call. In fact, let's go to birdies first. So, all right, Wyndham, where you at? There he is. Love that pick. From there, because Rory and Xander are at 0.9x, what do you think of going to either of them for bogeys since they're only 1.5? Like asking them to just make 2 bogeys on this course that averages 3.53. I don't hate that at all.
I'm good with either one of them higher. Really, I mean, I think it. I mean, and Rory's been known to get off the slow starts too. So
Let's see here. I have a feeling. I mean, Rory's 16th in bogey avoidance, 14th in birdie or better percentage. Where's Xander?
I mean, there's a reason they're 1.5, right? I mean, that we have to remember, like, when we're doing this.
So Xander's second in bogey avoidance, third in birdie or better. Part of that has to do with, playing different events, different difficulty of golf courses. The discrepancy, I do think, is the main thing that we want to see. But in both instances, like if we were to let me go to Scotty Scheffler, for example. I know he's going to be first by a mile in bogey avoidance. There's a chance he's also first by a mile in birdie or better just because he's been that much better than everybody. But definitely a guy he's better at avoiding bogeys than he is at making birdies. Yeah, he is first in both. What a freak. But let's see. Like some other guys near the top, like Alex Noren, for example, is third in bogey avoidance, and yet he is 111th in birdie or better. Like we want the opposite for the bogeys picks, but there are guys with enormous discrepancies. It seems like Underdog has done a pretty good job this week of not giving us those discrepancies. You know what? Let's check McIntyre. Anyone else you want me to check?
No, I mean, I think it's just going to come down to which one of these guys. I mean, the other guy that I like there is Tom Kim, just because of length over 2 boosted to 1.1. If you wanted to put a boosted play in, that's the one that stood out to me.
Tom Kim more than 2 bogeys. So let me look at him. Let's do that. I do think Tom Kim is somebody who gets crazy hot, but he also can make some bogeys. Winner, 119th in bogey avoidance, 27th in birdie or better rate, and we get the 1.1x multiplier. So now we've got 2. We only need 1 more. Do we want a higher on birdies? Do we want a lower on bogeys? What do you think?
I still like the under birdie Zalatoris or over bogey Zalatoris, either one, because I just think that he's coming back from being hurt. I think that the biggest unknown for him is if he does WD, where do we stand?
Yeah. Yeah. That's certainly a good point. Let me check one other thing real quick. What do you think of Thigala 4 birdies?
I have no opinion. He was one of the first ones I looked at, and I was like, man, I don't like. I think it just comes down to like the unknowns of the golf course.
Yeah. 61st in bogey avoidance, 42nd in birdie or better rate. He does make enough birdies, I think, but you know what?
I would go Minwoo Lee over 4 before I would go anybody else.
I just typed him in. I want to check him because I think I think this might be the answer. Yeah, 103rd in bogey avoidance, 53rd in birdie or better. He's obviously played a lot of difficult golf courses. That's the kind of discrepancy we want. We've got the distance we know from him. I like this a lot. What do you think? 3-pick play, 7.08x. Min Woo and Wyndham Clark more birdies. Tom Kim more bogeys.
7x on that play is crazy too.
Yeah. All right. I think that's our winner. Let's do that. That's not true. You do offer Pick'em in Virginia. I don't know why it gives me that message, but we'll figure it out. I'll be able to place it on my phone for some reason, but that's going to be the winner right there. So it is Wyndham Clark, Min-Woo Lee, more 4.0 birdies or better. Tom Kim higher, 1.1x for 2.0 bogeys or worse. So comes out to 7.08x. Again, that's in part because of the 1.1x multiplier, but it's also because we have inverse correlation where we're taking higher on both birdies and bogeys. So that's going to be the official 3-pick play of the week here for Pro V Pro. Anything else, Justin?
Nope, it's going to be a fun week. I'm looking forward to it. Next week will be better,
and then Open Championship next week. So we'll try to get that show out as early as possible. I absolutely love the Open Championship. A very similar course fit model, by the way, to this week. It's far more predictive, particularly in the 4 non-distance categories, but we also get distance being the clear sign above all else. And we'll be able to talk through Royal Troon as well, maybe find some other hidden advantages. That's going to be a fun week and a fun show. We will catch you then. Thanks for tuning in.